What makes a mortal strong? In the world of Elder Scrolls, the line between gods and mortals is often blurry. Many characters start as ordinary people, but grow into legends. For this video, we're focusing on those who were born in Mundus and lived as people. Anyone who began as a mortal, even if they later gained godlike power, will be included. Some contenders walk a fine line between myth and man, but we're judging them based on what they did while still mortal. We're looking at real deeds, battles fought, and the impact they had on Tamriel. It's not about who had the most magic or deepest secrets, but who made their mark through action and presence in the world. Our goal is to highlight strength that comes from will, skill, and sometimes luck. Mortal strength isn't just raw power. It's about influence, survival, and shaping history. These figures defined their eras. Some were kings, some rebels, others chosen ones, but all lived as mortals before becoming something more. Their stories span all of Tamriel, from Skyrim's snowy peaks to Hammerfell's deserts, Morrowind's volcanic land, and the imperial center of Cyrodiil. Some faced gods, others overcame impossible odds. Each has a unique tale of strength, whether physical, magical, or political. This video focuses on those who stand out as the strongest mortals. Mortal here means someone who could be hurt, could die, and live the life as a human, elf, or beast folk, not a spirit or god from birth. Even if they later ascended or changed, they must have clear, legendary mortal deeds. So get ready to meet the champions, warriors, rulers, and legends who earned their place through strength and will. As always, we're gonna look at the worthy contenders, look at their lore, and in the end, decide which one is the strongest. This is about power, born from flesh and blood, the strength of those who lived, fought, and left a mark on history. First up is Pelino Whitestrake. His mortal status is unclear. Some say he was a Shezarin, an avatar of Shor. Others think he was a divine weapon or a mythic hero, but he lived, fought, and died like a man. Pelino appeared during the time when the Aelid kings ruled Cyrodiil, and humans toiled as slaves under their cruelty. He led a human rebellion that shook the very foundations of elven power. Armed with weapons that some claim were artifacts from a future age, Pelino used tools and machines lost to history to fell towers and breach the walls of Aelid keeps. His tactics combined brutal strength and bold strategy, and his rage on the battlefield became a legend that spread from village to city. He struck at Aelid forces without warning, cutting down sorcerers and knights alike. His rampages were more than mere raids. They were crusades to free his people. Pelino's victories over the Aelid kings were stunning. He defeated Crassius Curio at his palace and such, severing the head of a tyrant in front of his own court. He felled Indren the Red at Lydia's manor by breaking the ancient warding sigils with a single swing of his blade. He hunted Artacarus the Banished through the ruins of Ralka, forcing the Sorcerer King to flee into the swamp where he vanished forever. Each king he faced tried dark magic and legions of elven warriors, but none could stand his blade or resist his will. Between battles, he gathered freed slaves and trained them in the art of war, forging an army that matched his own fire. His use of future tech is hard to prove, but tales speak of strange devices that opened doors and shattered stone, of machines that flared with light and cleared a path through Aelid magic. Some say he stole these machines from the tomb of Riman Cyrodiil, others that they fell from the sky in a storm of fire and ash. Whatever their origin, these tools gave him an edge no one else could match. After years of rebellion, Pelino marched on the heart of Aelid power. More than one sorcerer king joined forces to stop him, realizing that his fury threatened all they had built. United by fear, they unleashed their strongest spells and called upon ancient demons to defend their cities. In a final confrontation at the gates of the White Gold Tower, Pelino faced multiple enemies at once. He cut through armored lines that shone with elven steel and shattered wards that crackled with arcane energy. But in the end, he met his match. The Sorcerer Kings combined their might and struck Pelino down with a ritual that bound his soul and flesh. A single moment of silence followed his fall, as though the world itself held its breath. Then the Aelid kings turned on one another in a final battle for power, ending their reign in chaos. Pelinal's body lay broken, but his spirit lived on in the songs of bards and the prayers of freed slaves. His story became a beacon of hope, a lesson in strength and rebellion. Despite the myths that swirl around his nature, whether he was divine or simply a man of unmatched will, what matters is that he rose from mortal roots and changed the course of history. He freed a people, shattered an empire, and left behind questions about who he really was. Pelinal Whitestrake stands as proof that a mortal can wield power beyond measure, that rage and resolve can topple tyrants, and that legends are born from deeds, not from birthright. And next up is Vivec. Born as Vec in the city of Narcissus to humble Chimera parents, he walked the path of a mortal before rising above his origins to become one of the tribunal gods. His journey began with the formation of the tribunal alongside his companions, Almalexia and Soltasil, when they discovered the power of the heart of Lorcan beneath Red Mountain. While the others wielded this divine source to grant themselves godhood, Vivec's true strength lay in his mastery of Kim, the rare state of self-awareness within the cosmic dream that allowed him to shape reality by bending the rules of existence. Before his full ascension, he demonstrated tremendous skill as both poet and warrior, writing the deeply layered 36 lessons that wove myth and truth into a tapestry of divine authority, and defending his people by raising the floating city of Vivec against the crashing moons during the Battle of Red Mountain. His dual nature, as mortal child and nascent deity, gave him unique insight into both flesh and spirit. He moved through mortal trials to unite the Chimera under a common faith, negotiated peace treaties between clans, and stood against the Dwemer by using his voice as a weapon, speaking words that held reality in check. In council halls and on battlefields, he showed diplomacy and strength, guiding Morrowind through eras of war and turmoil. His red and blue halves symbolized the balance he maintained between emotion and reason, creation and destruction, reflecting his role as a mediator between mortals and gods. He mastered canticles and spells that few mortals could learn, channeling divine power in ways that felt almost like prophecy made flesh. Even before he claimed the mantle of divine rule, pilgrims journeyed from distant lands to hear his sermons and seek his guidance, recognizing a power in him that went beyond mere blood and bone. He built grand temples and taught the ways of tonal manipulation, a form of magic that could tune the world's fabric like an instrument. His presence alone could calm quakes or still storms, and his judgments were seen as both fair and merciless, reflecting his understanding of mortal flaws and divine justice. He walked among the people as a hero, yet his mind reached outward, perceiving the flowing currents of time and possibility. His feats in the mortal realm were more than victories of sword or spell. They were demonstrations of will shaping history at a scale that few could match. The creation of the city of Vivec, the defense of the Ashlanders, and the forging of peace between rival houses all occurred before he stood fully upon his throne as God. These acts show that his strength did not start with his divinity but was built on mortal deeds and trials. He understood love and loss, loyalty and betrayal, because he lived through them. His mortal story is woven with acts of compassion and acts of terror, teaching that power without empathy breeds tyranny and mercy without strength leads to ruin. In his lessons, he warned that even gods can be undone by arrogance, revealing that his power depended on awareness of self and world. This combination of human experience and metaphysical insight set him apart as a contender among mortals. Before becoming the living god of Morrowind, he walked the lands as a man, fought in swords and words, and shaped a nation through deeds that reverberate to this day. His mastery of Kim, his command of the tribunal's power, and his deep understanding of the mortal condition show why Vivec belongs on this list. His mortal accomplishments, uniting a people, bending reality through voice and will, and defending his homeland from impossible odds, are the bedrock of his legend. They prove that he earned his place not by divine birth, but through mortal trial and triumph, making him one of the strongest mortals ever to walk Tamriel. And next up is Talos, born Hjalti Earlybeard, a man who rose from humble beginnings to change the face of Tamriel forever. He began life in the snowy reaches of Skyrim, learning the ways of combat and leadership in exile among warriors and refugees. His earliest battles were against bandits and warlords, where he honed his tactics and voice into a weapon. As he traveled, he gathered followers impressed by his courage and vision of unity. Talos mastered the Tuum, the dragon shout, to a degree that no other human had before. He learned to call storms, shatter armor, and fell foes with a single word. This gift set him apart, but he used it not for terror alone. In diplomacy, he displayed the same power to protect villages and enforce treaties. Proud nobles and suspicious kings saw his voice as a shield, as well as a sword, and they joined his cause. Talos did not conquer through fear only. He negotiated alliances between rival lords, promising common defense and shared fortunes. He married into noble families of Hammerfell and High Rock, forging blood ties that strengthened his armies. He reformed war bands into disciplined legions with strict codes of honor and loyalty. His strategy combined speed, surprise, and the Tuum, allowing his forces to defend borders and strike deep into enemy territory. After subduing Skyrim, he crossed into High Rock, defeating the kings of Daggerfall and isolating their strongest cities. He then turned south into Hammerfell, where his tactics outmatched the swordmasters of Sentinel and Stros Mackay. Each conquest added new troops and new banners to his standard. His crowning achievement came when he seized Cyrodiil and claimed the White Gold Tower. There he wielded the Amulet of Kings and bound the Dragonfires to his bloodline, ensuring that the barrier between Mundus and Oblivion would hold against Daedric threats. The reshaping of the tower was his greatest mortal act. Using the tomb and the power of the amulet, he altered the tower's nature so it became a beacon of order, stabilizing the world's metaphysical core. Some say that he spoke to the spirits of Aetheris itself and bargained for their aid, though such stories drift into legend. What remains clear is that after his final stroke, the tower stood brighter and stronger than ever. Under his reign, the empire entered a golden age. He built roads crossing deserts and mountains, founded cities that became centers of trade and learning, and reformed laws to protect common folk as well as nobles. He encouraged scholars to record history and chart the stars, and he patronized artists whose work celebrated unity and strength. Markets flourished, temples welcomed all worshippers, and borders were safe from invasion. Talos' mortal achievements shaped culture, law, and the fabric of daily life. Tales of his deeds spread to distant lands, inspiring leaders in distant provinces to emulate his vision. He faced true threats more than once, assassins who struck at his life, rebellions in newly conquered lands, and Daedric cults seeking to undermine the empire. In each crisis, he stood firm, rallying his people with words that felt like thunder and deeds that felt like resolutions carved in stone. His mythic presence during these mortal trials rivals any god's legend. Warriors spoke of seeing his banner on the horizon as a promise of safety and victory. Children were named after him, and poets wrote verses calling him the Nord of Legend, or Voice of a Thousand Winds. Despite this fame, he remained mortal. He married a queen of Hammerfell, fathered heirs who would carry his line, and aged like any man. He walked among his soldiers, breaking bread with them after battles, listening to their fears and offering reassurance. He offered mercy to cities that surrendered, and he could be furious when betrayed. His temper was human, his wisdom earned through struggle, and his legacy built on choices made in the heat of the moment. When he died, likely in his old age from wounds and wear, the empire mourned as if a star had fallen from the sky. Yet his mortal deeds endured. The rule of his heirs and the continued thrumming of the tower kept his memory alive. His path from wandering warrior to emperor and deity shows that mortal strength can reshape the world. He built an empire, mastered a voice that bent reality, reshaped the world's metaphysical heart, and led with both strength and vision. These feats stand on their own, without his later deification. They qualify him as one of the strongest mortals ever to walk Tamriel. And next up is Wolffarth of Atmora, better known as Ysgramor's heir, and one of the most fearsome Shezarines ever to walk Skyrim's frozen plains. Born a mortal man among Atmoran clans, Wolffarth rose through trials of ice and steel to become a war leader whose name was spoken in fear and awe. He fought in bloody battles against giants and ice trolls, uniting his people under a banner of strength and a promise of a new home in the forests of Skyrim. When he landed on the shores of Skyrim with Ysgramor, his power was clear. He wielded his great axe with a force that felled trolls with a single blow and broke shields as if they were made of bark. Yet despite his mortal origin, whispers said he did not die when he fell in combat, but returned to lead his warriors once more. They called him the Returner, a ghostly king whose spirit would rise after every fall. Over time, Wolffarth's legend grew as tales of his resurrection spread from hold to hold. Some claimed he walked back from beyond the grave to guide his people through hardship. Others said he haunted the woods at night, a pale warrior whose eyes glowed like embers, leading lost hunters back to safety or dragging their souls into the shadows if they spoke his name in disrespect. His role in mythic events did not end there. When the new medium was first crafted by Zuran Arctus and his allies, the sheer force of the golem's power tore through the boundaries of time. During what is called the Warp in the West, time splintered and history fractured. In that chaos, Wolffarth appeared again, summoned by the echoes of Shazar's promise to strike at the heart of the Numidium's power. He stood beside rival emperors as they clashed over control of the brass god, raising his axe against the glowing automaton. Though accounts differ on whether he fell or stood triumphant, his presence shaped the outcome of that cataclysm. Through it all, his mortal roots and purpose remained clear. He was not a god by birth, but a man driven by duty to his people. Each return reminded Skyrim that a mortal's will can echo beyond death. He led settlers into the Reach, drove out the snow trolls from the Rift, and stood unbowed against the Reachmen who sought to destroy his kin. His name became a rallying cry for every Nord who felt the bite of winter or the sting of raiders on their homesteads. While many rulers faded into myth, Wolffarth's story stayed alive in the songs of skalds and the carvings on mead hall walls. They sang of his first death at the Battle of Pale Pass and how he rose again at Bleak Falls Barrow. They told of the time he walked into the clouded peaks of the throat of the world to face a dragon alone, and how his axe rang out like thunder on stone. He did all this while still a mortal man, bound by flesh and blood, yet free from the fear of death that ruled lesser warriors. He faced betrayal from his own kin, schemes by rival chieftains, and the harsh bite of winter's worst storms, yet he never wavered. His power was not just in his arms or in the cycle of his returns, but in the unbreakable will that drove him to act again and again for Skyrim's sake. Even after his final fall, if that fall truly came, his spirit lingered in the hearts of the Nords. Many claim that in times of dire need, Wolffarth's ghost still marches the length of Skyrim, axe in hand, answering the call of those who fight to protect their homes. His mortal legacy is a testament to the wrath and resilience one man can carry beyond death, a reminder that strength born in flesh can haunt the ages and shape the fate of empires. And next up is the Vestage, a mortal who started life as a soul-trapped prisoner in Molag Bal's realm and was pulled back into the world by the gods to stand once more on Mundus. The Vestige had no past, no family, and no memory beyond the moment of their rebirth in the wilds of Grahtwood, yet they rose from nothing to become a champion, the likes of which Tamriel had never seen. Their first challenge was to seal the Daedric gates that poured horrors into the land, and they moved from one crisis to the next without rest, forging alliances with the Aldmeri Dominion in Auridon, the Daggerfall Covenant in Glanumbra, and the Ebonheart Pact in Stonefalls, each faction united by fear of the planemeld that threatened to merge Nirn with Coldharbour. In Auridon, they fought alongside Queen Aerin's scouts to purge the coastline of Daedra, learning to wield both sword and shard of Aedric power. In Greenshade, they marched through corrupted forests to free the spirits of the wilds, and found strength in the forest folk who shared their resolve. In Stormhaven, they reclaimed Wayrest's walls from molten legions, and in Rivenspire, they closed a giant gate over the ruined spire of Chorrol Keep, saving entire families from certain death. Their deeds in Reaper's March earned the trust of the Khajiit caravans, and among the Argonians of Shadowfen they broke a siege of undead that rose from ancient burial mounds. They recovered lost relics in Malaboltor and forged treaties that brought new troops to their cause. Each victory added to their legend, but none was as great as their stand in Craglorn, where 3 gates opened at once and rifts of raw oblivion energy bled into the mortal world. Alone, the Vestige faced waves of Balfoyen, Civilai, and Sheogorath's mad knights. They fought without a shield as much as with it, turning the tide by closing the final gate with a seal carved in both Adric and Daedric runes, proving that a mortal could master words and steel alike. Their final test came in Cold Harbor itself, the realm of Molag Bal, where the air burned with ghost fire and shadows moved like living things. There, within the Moat of Brass and the Spire of Order's End, they confronted the Prince of Domination in a fight that shook the foundations of reality. The Vestige called on the artifacts they had gathered, the Staff of Molag Bal, purified by the service of Clavicus Vile, the armor of the Divine, reforged by the touch of Meridia, and the blade of the Ebony Warrior, tempered by soul steel, and struck at the god's throne. Molag Bal's roar shook the spire, but the Vestige stood firm, driving a final strike that shattered the Daedric prince's hold on Tamriel and sealed the last gate between realms. Through all of this, the Vestige remained a mortal being. They bled, they feared, and they carried the weight of every life they saved on their arms. They never claimed divine power or sat upon a god's throne. Their strength came from their will to stand when all seemed lost, and from the bonds they forged with mortal allies who trusted them with their homes and families. They walked away from Cold Harbor as a living hero, but they never took on the mantle of any deity. Instead, they chose to live among the people whose hope they restored, a reminder that even a soulless shell can become a beacon of light. The Vestige's story shows that true strength lies not in birthright or divine gift, but in the courage to face oblivion and return to tell the tale. And next up is Zuran Arctus. His status is debated. Some say he became the Underking, a ghostly figure tied to dead emperors, but he began life as a mortal man. He served as a battle mage under Emperor Uriel Septim V, fighting on the Geralt Mountains, where his mastery of both steel and sorcery earned him a fearsome reputation. He wielded spells that could rip stone and metal alike while wearing heavy armor, blending destructive magic with tactical skill on the battlefield. Yet, his feats extended beyond combat. As head of the Alessian Order's magical council, he took part in the crafting of the Numidium, a colossal golem powered by the divine power of the Heart of Lorkhan, and sculpted by Kagranak's tools. He guided the rites that bound the giant automaton's soul to his own line, believing that the device would secure the Empire's future by projecting its power across Tamriel. His knowledge of tonal architecture and magic ran deeper than most scholars could fathom, and he spoke often of the need to reshape reality for the good of the Empire. The creation of the Numidium was his greatest mortal act. He traveled to the ruby throne beneath the white gold tower, wielding spells that bent the fabric of magic itself, binding the golem's heart and soul with runes that glowed like molten metal. He watched as the Numidium took form, a towering construct that could rend mountains and topple armies. He believed he alone could control its power. His ambition drove him straight into what came to be the Warp in the West, a Dragonbreak event that shattered the timeline and left history itself in chaos. During that event, Zuran Arctus and his allies faced rival claimants to the throne, Baron Zaya of Morrowind, Valenwood's Argon Argar, the Underking of Skyrim, and the King of Derenni. Each sought to claim the Numidium's might, but when the artifact engine activated, the device's reality-bending power touched time and space, sending shockwaves through the world. In one version of events, Arctus fell in a final battle. At the heart of the golem, his soul merged with the Numidium's spirit. In another, he survived and became the Underking, guiding ghostly emperors in secret. What remains clear is that the warp in the West changed everything. After those events, Zuran Arctus vanished from living memory, or so history says. Some scholars record his death, noting that his body was never found and that his name was cursed from the annals. Others claim he lives on in shadow, an immortal watcher in the void between worlds. Still, his core life was mortal and marked by deeds that shaped the Third Empire. He led armies, taught mages, and reshaped the tower that stands at the Empire's heart. He mastered magic in ways few ever matched, and used that mastery in service of a vision for a unified realm. Even if his fate remains a mystery, his mortal story is written in both triumph and hubris. He aimed to control the power of divinity and ended up unleashing a force that broke time itself. His legacy is a warning and a marvel. He showed that a mortal mind, armed with skill and will, can craft wonders and horrors that echo through ages. He lived as a battle mage, a scholar, and an architect of reality's foundations. He walked among emperors and ruled armies, but he was mortal in thought and body until the last moment his story was told. Zuran Arctus stands as proof that mortal ambition can reach divine heights, but also that the boundary between man and God is fragile. His feats remain in legends and prophetic texts, carved on the walls of ruined towers and whispered in the halls of the White Gold Tower. Though time may have erased his name from most records, the ripples of his life continue to shape Tamriel. And next up is the Nervarin, the mortal rebirth of Indoril Nerevar, chosen by prophecy to end the long shadow of Dagoth-Ur and the Tribunal's rule. Born as an ordinary person in Morrowind, the Nervarin first learned of their fate when the priests of Azura called them to the Ghost Fence, where they sealed the breach in time and space with little more than courage and steel. From that moment, they walked the path laid out in the Ashlander prophecies, gathering signs and tools left by the Chimer hero of old. They crossed the ash wastes to seek the tools of Kagarnak, journeyed into the deadly caverns beneath Red Mountain, and faced trials that tested their mind and body. In every hold, they met skeptics and mockers, but they proved their claim by fulfilling the steps written in dust and stone. They healed the blight that spread from Kagranak's folly, quelled the restless spirits of Nerevar's old friends, and survived the deadly touch of Corpus that twisted lesser souls into madness. Armed with the tools of legend, keening, sunder, and moonsugar, they carved through legions of ash spawn and the bound spirits of Dwemer constructs, each strike bringing them closer to the heart of the mountain where Dagoth-Ur waited. Dagoth-Ur, once Indoril Nerevar's friend and mentor, had used Nerevar's own heart to feed the divine power of the Tribunal and bind himself to the mountain's soul. The Tribunal gods had grown fat on that stolen power, but the Nervarin refused to bow to their might. In the final clash they faced Dagoth-Ur alone, a battle of will and steel beneath the smoldering peak. The hero's blade struck true, breaking the Godyu King's flesh and shattering the divine link that had warped Morrowind for centuries. With Dagoth-Ur's fall came the collapse of the Tribunal's power. The temple's hold on the land crumbled as the truth of their theft spread like wildfire through the Dunmer homes. Priests abandoned their pulpits, and the great shrines stood empty of false gods. The Nervarin emerged from the depths unchanged in purpose, but altered in fate. Though some say they found a way to live beyond death, walking the land as a silent guardian, they never claimed godhood for themselves. They remained a hero of flesh and blood, not a god on a throne. Their story did not end with a crown or a temple. Instead, they vanished into the mists of legend, leaving behind a people freed from tyranny and a land ready to reshape its own destiny. Every town from Gnisis to Balmora remembers the Nervarin's name, and scholars still debate whether they lived on in the ghost of the mountain or faded like a shard of starlight at dawn. What matters here is that their greatest feats were achieved as a mortal hero, with no claim to divine birth or worship. They walked the path of man, faced the gods and won, and then chose to step aside rather than sit among them. That choice, perhaps more than any sword stroke, proves their strength. The Nervarin's tale shows how a mortal can stand against a god, how prophecy can guide a life without trapping it, and how power earned can be greater than power taken. Their legend lives in the stones of Red Mountain and the hearts of the people they freed, a reminder that even a single mortal can reshape the world. And next up is the hero of Kuwatch. This mortal began as a prisoner thrown into a city under siege and rose from those ashes to become the savior of the empire. When Mehrunes Dagon's cult assassinated Emperor Uriel Septim VII, Oblivion Gates tore open across Tamriel, unleashing Daedra that laid waste to towns and slaughtered innocents. Among the chaos, Kuwatch fell first, its walls crumbling under firestorms and its people drowning in terror. Out of the rubble stepped a hero, armed with little more than courage and a sword, determined to close that first gate. They cut through burning streets, gathered survivors, and sealed the portal with a rite borrowed from ancient blade scrolls. Their victory inspired others, and word of their deeds spread fast. They moved from gate to gate, each portal a doorway to destruction, and each victory a testament to mortal will. They fought in the fields north of Kuwatch, where Daedra swarmed like locusts, and they ran through swirling embers to drive the invaders back. Along the way, they rescued key figures, Blades operatives, devout knights of the Nine, and citizens trapped in the paths of armies of oblivion. Each ally brought knowledge of sealing rituals, relics needed to complete the rites, or forged pacts that rallied more troops to their cause. With every gate closed, their legend grew. They recovered the Amulet of Kings, the sacred symbol of the Septim line, from the dead hands of cultists in the streets of Chorrol. They reclaimed Chorrol's walls, turning its embattled defenders into a force that followed them south to the Imperial City. There, Mehrunes Dagon's greatest invasion awaited. A massive gate hovered above the white gold tower, raining Daedric flames and shattering hopes. The hero fought through columns of Daedric warriors, past shattered legions and fallen palaces, until they stood beneath the tower's stone arches. There they faced Mankar Camoran, the secret leader of the Mythic Dawn, whose twisted charisma drew disciples from every corner of the Empire. Mankar wielded magic that warped the sky and bent reality, but the hero met him blade to spell, deflecting firestorms with a shield of divine wards and striking him down in a final, furious clash. With his fall, the Imperial line lay broken and trembling. It fell to Martin Septim, a priest unaware of his birthright, to step forward and claim the Amulet of Kings. The hero escorted him through empty corridors and shattered sanctums to the Chapel of the Crescent, where Martin ascended as the avatar of Akatosh, the dragon god of time. In that hallowed chamber, Martin unleashed a storm of pure Aedra energy that banished Mehrunes Dagon and sealed the Oblivion Gates forever. When the fires died and the Daedra retreated, Cyrodiil stood in stunned silence. The land was scarred, but it was free once more. The hero of Kuwatch had done what no emperor, no army, and no god could. They stood between Tamriel and annihilation and held the line. Their mortal feats remain unmatched, closing dozens of Oblivion Gates under impossible odds, defeating a Daedric cult that killed an emperor, reclaiming the Imperial City, and securing the survival of the Empire. Throughout it all, they bled and they feared. They lost friends and saw cities burn, but they never wavered. Some say that after the crisis, the Daedric prince Sheogorath claimed the hero's soul, appointing them as the new mad god, but such tales drift into rumor and madness. What cannot be denied are the mortal deeds written in history and song. From prison cell to champion of the world, the hero of Kuwatch proved that a mortal can stand against the forces of oblivion and reshape the fate of nations. Their story is proof that strength, born in flesh and blood, can echo across eras, a reminder that even in a world of gods and monsters, mortals can rise above their limits and save the world. And finally, the last Dragonborn stands among the mortals who changed Tamriel's fate. Born under unusual circumstances in Skyrim, this hero carried in their veins the soul of a dragon and the heart of a person. From their first steps, they showed signs of power that no mortal had before. They learned to speak the ancient language of the dragons, the Thu'um, and used it to shape the world around them. Their journey began when they resisted the call of Alduin, the World Eater. even as dragons returned to rule the skies and burn the land. At Ancient's Ascent, they faced their first dragon and used Shout not just to shatter bones, but to bind the beast's will, forcing it to kneel or fall. Word of their triumph spread across Skyrim, and people who had lost hope found reason to stand again. Their path led to Sovngarde, where they followed Alduin's trail, not to die among fallen heroes, but to challenge a god of dragons on his own ground. They called on the power of the voice to open the way, then fought through legions of spectral warriors and took the final shout that banished Alduin into myth once more. Yet their story did not end there. The whispers of power reached the Isle of Solstheim, where Miraak, the first dragonborn, had turned against his own. Miraak had served Hermaeus Mora and stolen secrets from Apocrypha before breaking free and ruling the Ashland. The last dragonborn sailed to Solstheim, met Ebonheart-packed soldiers and Telvanni wizards, gathered the tools needed to resist Hermaeus Mora's pull, and crossed into the Black Library, where every secret lay in shifting words. They bested Miraak in battle, not by matching magic with magic alone, but by using the Thrum to break the first dragonborn's will, proving that a mortal mind could rise above the twisted promise of a Daedric lord. Their triumph ended Miraak's rule and freed Solstheim from Apocrypha's grasp. But even that victory was not enough. In Apocrypha itself, the chamber of Hermaeus Mora awaited. The last dragonborn stepped into the shifting halls of memories and secrets, facing Daedric traps and horrors drawn from the darkest corners of mortal minds. They called on the voice to rend armor and words, to cut through illusions and strike at the heart of a Daedric prince's realm. With each shout, they shaped reality, bending walls and breaking wards, until the final echo of power forced Mora's gate to close. They returned to Tamriel scarred but alive, their body whole, their mind clear. They had faced gods, dragons, and Daedra, and they remained mortal in flesh and thought. They built alliances with Jarl Balgruf in Whiterun, aided the Stormcloaks or defended against them, but never let politics distract from the greater fight. They helped the companions banish Hircine's mark, healed the people of Markarth from involuntary stoneflesh, and shut down the Thalmor's prisms that hunted dragon souls. Every step they took showed that mortal strength can stand against any force, no matter how divine. The last dragonborn mastered clear voice, shouts that could stop time for a moment, move mountains, and call storms. They bent dragon minds with voice and will. They used steel and flame, words and force to protect the land they loved. They never claimed to be more than a person, even when the Tuum echoed like thunder through lonely peaks. Their name became legend beyond the borders of Skyrim, carried by merchants and bards who spoke of how a mortal stood against the end of days and turned fate aside. Yet they walked away from every battle with the weight of loss, the cost of power, and the memory of every friend who fell. They bore their scars without complaint, a reminder that even the strongest mortal must pay a price. In the end, the last dragonborn did not become a god. They remained one of us, a mortal hero whose deeds shaped the world. Their story shows that carrying the soul of a dragon does not make one less human, and that mortal heart and will can challenge the greatest threats in existence. Their legacy lives on in the songs, sung in mead halls, and the whispered prayers under dragon-shattered skies. They proved that strength, born in flesh and blood, can bend the heavens and stand against oblivion itself. And finally, we come to the question: what is mortal might in Elder Scrolls? Across these legends, we've seen strength born from steel, from voice, from will, and from fate. Each contender showed power in a different way. Vivec wielded magic that bent reality and spoke with the force of creation. Pelino raged through Aelid kings with mythic fury that still echoes in song. Talos united empires with voice and vision, reshaping the world's heart at White Gold Tower. The Nervarin fulfilled prophecy to shatter false gods. The hero of Kuwatch stood alone against Daedric legions. The Vestage reclaimed their soul to seal realms of oblivion. And the last dragonborn bent dragonkind and Daedra alike with voice and blade. If we break down their might by type, we see distinct peaks. Most magically powerful stands Vivec, whose mastery of Kim let him dance on the edge of creation itself. Most mythically overwhelming is Pelino Whitestrake, whose rampages and future-born tools turned rebellion into legend and reshaped the fate of man and elf. Most politically influential is Talos. He forged alliances, toppled kingdoms, and became the pillar of an empire whose law still holds time and place. Most heroic, in a grounded sense, could be the Nervarin or the last Dragonborn, heroes who never claimed godhood and yet faced impossible odds to free their people and banish ancient terrors. In the end, power depends on where you're standing. For magic, look to Vivec. For myth, look to Pelino. For empire, look to Talos. And for pure mortal heroism, look to the Nervarin or the Dragonborn. But if we're talking overall might from a mortal start, one who built an empire, mastered the divine gift, reshaped the world's metaphysical core, and then joined the gods, Talos takes the crown. And if you enjoyed this dive into Tamriel's greatest mortals, be sure to sub, leave a like, drop a comment on who you think is strongest. And thanks for watching. Bye.